today I'm going to talk about Longlegs, which is a new film by Oz Perkins, and it stars Michael Monroe, and it's come out and did really well in the box office, which is a real surprise. This film is not the normal type of film. It is fairly eccentric, and I know people who were put off by the story. It just wasn't really for them. So it's not exactly the most obvious story. It takes place in the 90s. It starts off with kind of Santa Lamb's kind of a vibe, very influenced by Thomas Harris story. But actually, the reality of the film is it's much more of like a fairy tale, a dark fairy tale, European fairy tale type of logic to it, rather than the kind of procedural elements that you associate with that kind of serial killer film. So it kind of uses the serial killer cliches to start with to get you involved in the type of film as to basically get into the world, and then it starts to subvert these expectations to do something else with it. I mean, it's much more influenced by someone like David Lynch than it is by Silence of the Lambs in lots of ways. And it has a sense of absurdity that Lynch has, that sense of the world being crazy and you can't quite figure everything out. But it's also, it does things that David Lynch wouldn't do. There's much more of an emotional attachment to the characters. Lynch has that emotional attachment, but he has more of a distance, really, until during the build-up, and slowly the emotional attachment comes to the characters as you go. This is much closer to the characters in lots of ways than Lynch would probably allow himself. So it's like, even though it's influenced by Lynch, it's not trying by a David Lynch film. So that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to say, is like, it's his own thing. It's got its influences. It doesn't try and hide its influences, but it's got its own idea of what it wants to be and what it is. So yeah, this is for me, one of the best horror films of the year. And it's probably one of the best films of the year. It's just got this kind of clear logic of what it is, which doesn't mean it makes sense to the outside world. For some people who like clearly defined logic of why this happens, I want an actual reason that makes total sense in the real world. This is not a film for you. This is really not. As I said, it takes place in like fairy tale logic. The further you get into it, and the further you get into the madness of the situation, it's not really about that kind of logical outcome. It's about the kind of irrational horrors you've got in your mind, irrational fears you've got in your mind about the way the world might actually work, and the way you might be involved in the world. And it's just this sense of people trying to make sense of things and trying to find a logical outcome when it's really an emotional story. It's really a story about a family, ultimately. So the story basically is Michael Monroe plays a FBI agent who is thought of as being a bit of a psychic, but she's also very inward. She's not like the most outgoing agent. She's like someone who's in her own head that people probably don't want to be around too much. She's just probably viewed as someone who's a bit in the spectrum a little bit, just not easy to deal with. When she gets results, they're trying to find a psychopath, and she's the first person who figures out where he is, just almost by psychic, telepathic connection to that's the wrong house, he's in there, which is kind of creepy and weird. But the FBI think, okay, there's something here, let's use it for this Longlegs investigation. Longlegs investigation is something that's been going on for ages in the FBI, where it's this person called Longlegs who seems to influence families to kill, like the fathers to kill their families and then kill themselves. That's the whole Longlegs scenario they're trying to investigate, because it doesn't make sense. It's like, there's a guy behind this who's creating these situations that these people kill themselves, and there's no logical reason why, how to link the families. There's no logical set up beyond a certain, it's around about a certain date they figured out, but they can't quite figure out when the date is. And it's just, and he leaves them messages and these weird codes that don't quite make sense to anybody. So it's just this very strange situation. And basically, they're just trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? What's the problem? Why is this happening? And she's been given the case to investigate a little bit more since she did success with this other killer. And she instantly finds clues. She instantly finds logical, weird little things no one's noticed before. And as the case goes on, they find a fresh set of victims, or not fresh. Victims have been there for a while, but they haven't been found. Which leads to the most like Seven-like scene where you find these rotten bodies and things. But as the story goes on, she's finding these dolls and these links to Longlegs, and it's also there's links to her past as well, tied to Longlegs, which the film does not try and hide in any way. It's like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, basically. It sets up in the first scene, and you're waiting for her to figure it out that there is a tie between her and Longlegs, and it's the ties, again, it's much more about like fairy tale logic than it is about like real life logic. And that's why the film's hard to talk about. It's one of the things, I'm not going to get spoilers in this video, but there's this sense of there's a strangeness within, there's inherent strangeness within the film that's like asking you to accept things you know can't be true, but it's like these ideas are creepy, so let's just go along with it. The idea of someone who can convince a loving father to kill his family, and then as you find out the reality of what's caused the issues, it gets creepier and creepier, and there's some bizarre dialogue scenes, and eventually you get to see Longlegs, which is Nicolas Cage. He's an eccentric, weird character in himself, and he's not exactly what you expect to find the scariest man ever, and instead he's a bit of a freak and weird, and who he is compared to the rest of the story is more complicated than initially it appears. Now this allows Cage to go crazy in the part, but the important thing is he's ultimately part of the mystery, not the full mystery. So if you weren't expecting him to be like a Hannibal Lecter type character, it's not quite that, it's something else. He's much more like a trickster demon, and Cage plays it really well because he allows himself to be absurd but kind of creepy at the same time, and part of the world rather than being the full thing. And you probably feel I'm trying to skate around what's going on, but there is an emotional attachment to the lead character, to what's happening, that becomes more tragic and darker the further the film goes on. As you slowly finds out more and more about what's going on and the kind of crazy logic of it all. So this is a wonderful film. The performances are terrific, and they're all in keeping with what they need to be, which is they have to be kind of realistic in some sense, but it's also kind of slightly operatic in another sense, but not in a kind of show-offy way. But it is a kind of way of like the characters have simple spines to them that you can bounce off, and you can't just be naturalistic all the time. You have to have other elements to it, which all the cast understand. The only person who can go off a bit more than Nicolas Cage is Longlegs, but even then he has to be reeled in to a certain angle for the film to work. So it's not like he's just going, whoa, I'm crazy. He's falling a line as well. So everyone's falling a slightly naturalistic, slightly operatic line that's very kind of complicated. And the atmosphere is terrifically done. It's shot beautifully. There's a sense of ominous threat throughout that's coming through the film, and there's a sense of doom coming through the film, but it's not overstated. There's a sense of there's something logical falling apart. I mean, it reminds me a lot of like Cronenberg. The sense of Cronenberg has this. He always starts out with a world that can make sense within itself, and then you start to find the weirdness within the world, and the weirdness sort of slowly takes over the film. This film has that same feeling to it, and it's just got this sort of intensity. So Longlegs is terrific. I don't want to go any further because I think I would start spoiling it, and you don't want it spoiled. You want to not know much about the second half as you wait to see how it all unfolds. But it is really well made, and even if you spot certain things that are going to come, it doesn't matter because the whole thing's about seeing the story unfold. So it's not about shock. It's about atmosphere. It's about how letting characters understand where they live, where they preside in the world. So yeah, Longlegs is terrific. I hope you go and watch it. I think it's very much one of the strongest films of the year. And I'll see you next time.